Okay.
Madam Chair, you're punctual as always.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, and welcome to the
Good
December 10th
morning.
Madam Chair, you're punctual as
teleconference
always.
meeting of the Memphis and Shelby County Land Use Control Board. My name is Mary Sharp, and I will be serving as your chairperson today. We will begin this morning's meeting with a roll call. Mr. Whitehead, would you proceed, please?
Yes, ma'am. And before I give the roll call, one person on the call right now has their YouTube slightly above mute because I can hear a bit of an echo. So if you're on the call, you don't need the audio on the YouTube because you're on the call. With that, Mr. Fleming.
Present.
Mr. Gill.
Present.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace.
Here.
Mr. McKinnon.
Here.
Ms. O'Connell.
Here.
Dr. Pritchard.
Here.
Mr. Thomas. Mr. Tolles.
Here.
Ms. Wilbanks.
Here.
And Madam Chair.
Here.
We have a
Thank
quorum.
you, Mr. Whitehead. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Everyone should already have a copy of today's agenda for this December 10th, 2020 meeting. Anyone who wishes to be a speaker on today's agenda has already filled out the attendance speaker's card, and it is in the hands of Mr. Whitehead or his staff. When it is time for you to speak, he or his staff will call your name, will unmute you at the appropriate time for you to speak. Please wait about 10 seconds before speaking so you can be properly unmuted and so that we can hear all of your remarks. At this point, I would like to read our conflict of interest statement. The adopted policy of the Land Use Control Board requires that any member of the board recuse himself or herself from any participation in the discussion or voting on any matter on the meeting's agenda in which he or she may have direct or indirect personal interest. The members shall, in this teleconference, let us know verbally they are recusing themselves during deliberation or on any matter from which they have recused themselves. An abstention may substitute for a recusal for the purposes of maintaining a quorum. I would now like to get the approval of our minutes from the last November 12, 2020 Land Use Control Board meeting. May I please have a motion?
So moved. This is Libby.
Second. Harold Thomas.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Those against, nay. Okay, motion carries. At this point, we're ready to hear the director's report from Mr. Zena.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, board members. I'll be brief this morning. Last month, I previewed the annual update to the Memphis 3.0 comprehensive plan and outlined a few recommended changes that we plan to present to the board in a couple of months. There was a question of whether the board members could go ahead and see those specific changes now. I just wanted to alert you to a link on your agenda under the director's report to that proposed filing for the annual update to the Memphis 3.0 plan. So you should be able to see that by clicking that link on your agenda. The update has also been released via the Memphis 3.0 website to the general public, and we have a window open now for the general public to be able to submit comments before it is officially filed and comes to you. That concludes my report this morning.
Okay, thank you very much. Short report. Okay, Mr. Whitehead, may I please get a secretary's report for this month and an explanation of today's procedures.
Yes, ma'am, and before I do that, I'll note that Mr. Thomas has joined us. Usually I take this opportunity to update the body on cases that were either appealed or just otherwise were forwarded to the legislative bodies and the result of those actions. We had a few gas stations from the last couple of months. The one at Hernando and Norris was withdrawn before its hearing at the City Council. Number 2, the one at Austin Peay and Yale, that was just north of the old Raleigh Springs Mall site, that was rejected, as was the one at Summer and Bartlett, just west of the old Kmart. The auto sales at 3rd and Lucerne by Gaston Park, just north of Gaston Park, was approved, and the 4-lot subdivision out on Monterey Mills Road, that the remonstrators appealed this body's approval to the county commission, and the county commission sustained this body's approval of that subdivision. So there's your update from the past month. Now I'll go to our procedures. But before I do that, I did want to make a note. Ms. Wilbanks will be calling out the agenda items that are approvable on the consent calendar. And I just wanted to explain on some of the reasoning behind the holds. Most of the cases that will be moved by this board on the consent calendar are going to be holds either for 1 month or 2 months. And so let me do that very quickly just so the board knows why we have so many holds. Number 3 will be held for 1 month. The purpose is the applicant would like to revise the site plan. We have not seen that revised site plan, nor have the neighbors, but obviously before this body can take any action, it'll be acting upon that revised site plan. That's the Deloach and Poplar project. Number 6, that is a hold for 1 month. The applicant failed to post the sign in time. The UDC, the code says you have to post the sign no later than 10 days before this meeting. That is also the reasoning behind number 10. I'm moving out of order to complete that sentence in a sensible manner. Number 10 is being held for 1 month for the same reason, sign posting. Number 9, on the other hand, is a redesign. The applicant would like to, I believe, change some of the conditions or the design really related to the Veterans Housing Project on Hawkins Mill. And finally, Madam Chair, number 13, we have a request from the applicant to hold that case for 2 months in order for the applicants to have a meeting or a conversation with one of the property owners who wishes to be omitted from the district. So there's the justification behind the holds. Now we'll go to the process. For those cases not approved on the consent calendar, we will have a public presentation, a public hearing on each of those cases. And the process for that will be OPD will give a staff presentation, followed by the applicant's presentation and any testimony from people in support of the application. The total time for the applicant and the supporters will be 10 minutes. Following each speaker, the chair will ask board members if they have any questions from that speaker before they move on. Following the applicant and the supporters, the opposition will have also a total of 10 minutes to present their case. And again, the chair will ask board members if they have any questions of those speakers. The Q&A time is not deducted from the 10-minute total amount of time. Following those 2 groups of 10 minutes, the applicant will have a 3-minute rebuttal period. At the end of all of that, the chair will ask one final time if there's any questions of the applicant or any speakers, whether they are in support or opposition. And after that additional Q&A period lapses, the board will close public deliberations and by making a motion for approval or a hold, and then vote on the matter. If after that motion is made and the public hearing has been closed and there's additional Q&A of the applicant or supporters or opposition, the body may reopen the public hearing provided both sides are heard. Again, if any member, I'll skip this because we have all the speakers' cards, and I believe that is my Secretary's report and discussion of process, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whitehead. The Land Use Control Board is a supporter of community involvement, and we welcome neighborhood comments and feedback. We are respectful of the fact that many of you have taken off work, adjusted work schedules, or just adjusted your schedules, even if you're still at home, to be heard today via telephone. But we ask that your comments be made within the time frame allowed. If there are multiple speakers, please try not to be repetitive with your side's limited time. Lastly, I'd like to ask you all to silence your phones so as not to interrupt or disturb anyone during today's proceedings, as these can still be heard if you are unmuted via this teleconference. With our procedures now explained, I would like to introduce to you Ms. Lisa Wilbanks, who will be this morning's consent agenda chairperson. Ms. Wilbanks will read those items 1 through 13, which will be on the consent agenda. Those items where requests have been made for public hearing will not be placed on the consent except for where those cases that will be held in abeyance until future meetings. Ms. Wilbanks, would you proceed, please?
Yes, ma'am. Item number 1, case SAC 20-21, Binghamton. The request is a physical closure of a part of the Autumn Avenue right-of-way east of Litford Street and north of Sam Cooper Boulevard. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 3, case PD 20-14 in the University District. The request is for apartments on the west side of the Lopes between Poplar and Central. Staff recommendation is a hold for 1 month. Item number 6, case PD 08-3006 in Cordova. The request is a mixed-use development at the northwest corner of Walnut Grove Road and Houston Levee Road. Staff recommendation is a hold for 1 month. Item number 7, case PD 15-310 in Southeast Memphis. The request is a modification to development at the southeast corner of Hacks Cross and Misty Meadow to allow a drive-through restaurant. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 9, case PD 20-17 in Raleigh. The request is a multi-use veterans facility providing a total of 76 multifamily dwelling units with supportive programs and services, including an on-site private community center at 3681 Hawkins Mill Road. Staff recommendation is hold for 1 month. Item number 10, case SUP 12-207 in the Medical District. The request is a major modification to a soup kitchen at 1306 Monroe Avenue and an adjacent parking lot to 1, permit transient lodging, 2, to remove the restriction on the hours of operation, 3, allow outdoor food service, and 4, extend the special use permit in perpetuity. Staff recommendation is hold for 1 month. Item number 11, case SUP 20-14 in Northeast Memphis. The request is auto sales at 2369 Covington Pike. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. And item number 13, case CTHD at Crosstown. The request is the creation of the Crosstown Historic Overlay District. Staff recommendation is hold for 2 months. And that is our consent agenda.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Hearing none, then can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
Yes. Move to approve item number 1, case SAC 20-21. Item number 3, case PD 20-14. Item number 6, case PD 08-306. Item number 7, case PD 15-310. Item number 9, case PD 20-17. Item number 10, case SUP 12-207. Item number 11, case SUP 20-14. And item number 13, case CTHD.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, I assume we're ready for a roll call vote.
Mr. Fleming,
Aye.
Mr. Gill,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace,
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon,
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell,
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Tolles,
Yes.
Ms. Wilbanks,
Yes.
and Chair Sharp.
Yes.
That's 10 ayes.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Now we will go to the regular agenda, and we're going to hear 2, 4, 5, 8, and 12. I want to turn the regular agenda over to Dr. Pritchard. Dr. Pritchard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Agenda item number 2, PD 20-13, Cooper Young, planned residential development at 795 Tanglewood with reduced minimum lot size and minimum building setbacks. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions.
Thank you. Is the applicant present?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We're ready to hear from the staff.
Okay, good morning to the members of the board and the public. This is Brett Davis with the Division of Planning and Development reporting to you from City Hall. So, first case of the morning, PD 20-13. This is a request for a planned residential development with reduced minimum lot size and building setbacks. Okay, next slide, please. Excuse the lag on YouTube. So this development is being called the Tanglewood Place Planned Development. We're looking at 795 Tanglewood and an adjacent parcel. Owner and applicant is 795 Tanglewood, represented by Mr. McCaskill of McCaskill and Associates. Again, the request is as stated earlier. The reason this is a planned development rather than a subdivision is to reduce the minimum lot size and setbacks found in the residential 6 single-family zoning district, which would normally require 6,000 square feet per lot. Again, this is in Cooper Young in the Greater Midtown District. Next slide. Here's the subdivision in which the land is currently located. It dates to 1905, and you can see that the lots were then 40 feet wide on both Elsie and Tanglewood, and that this parcel today includes land that was formerly part of the Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way. That land was purchased on different occasions over the past 60 years. This is a map of those property owners who received notices of public hearing. 126 notices were mailed and 8 letters of opposition were received. Here's an aerial photograph of the site. This has been the home of the Memphis Metal Manufacturing Company since the 40s. It's zoned again R6. The Memphis Board of Adjustment granted a use variance in the 40s to allow an attic fan manufacturing plant. So this company was coasting on that approval for decades. This development will bring it back towards the base zoning of residential. I'll point out this slide is showing something that's not included in the staff report. The red represents land that's included within the Cooper Young Historic District. So the area of about one of the proposed lots is actually included in the Historic District. However, the recommended conditions of approval would bind the entire development to review by the Landmarks Commission in accordance with the Cooper Young district design guidelines. So in a sense, we would be expanding that historic district to include this site. You see that it has two frontages, and it's sort of an elbow-shaped irregular lot. The purple represents its former industrial use. We see that there is single-family uses on most sides. There's a fair amount of vacant land. The land to the west is showing as pink as office, but that will actually be a residential plan development that's currently under construction, and same to those vacant lots to its east, another residential plan development that will soon be under construction. Okay. Just some photographs of the site. Sorry, 1 second. Here's the front facade of the existing structure from Tanglewood and a view south down Tanglewood. We see that it's not currently improved with gutter or sidewalk, but we are requiring that on Tanglewood along the length of the facade. Next slide. And the view of the structure from Elsie. And here we see on the left-hand side some of the neighboring properties and houses. Okay, let's take a look at the site plan. So here's the proposed conceptual site plan. This is not finalized. We would still have to do a final plan review, but this is very close to what it will look like in its final form. So we see a new street that goes along its northern and western perimeters, with a sidewalk on the south side and east side of the street along the houses. We see 3 lots on Elsie Avenue that fit in with the existing context of that street in terms of width and setback, and then several lots that face the new street to the north. So this accomplishes a few things. It's an outward-facing development that integrates into the neighborhood. It eliminates the dead end at the western terminus of Elsie, as now you can actually turn in through the neighborhood and have egress onto Tanglewood Avenue, or Tanglewood Street, excuse me. These streets are proposed to be private, but they would be open to general access thanks to general access easements. All the lots would have vehicular access from a rear alley. We are additionally requiring porches on all houses with a minimum depth of 8 feet and raised ground floor elevation of at least 18 inches. One thing I'll point out real quick, just because it's interesting, is if you'll see the trees here being shown, this is not all the landscaping that will go into the site. We still have to work that out a little bit. But we are, in order to ensure we have shade trees, but also because we're recognizing there's a limited amount of space, doing these sort of tree bump outs in the street and the parking lane, which you don't see too often around Memphis. Okay, next slide. Here's the originally proposed plan. We're just showing you this because we want you to see the amount of work that's gone into this, and staff is proud that we've collaborated with both the applicant and with the neighborhood association to make a plan that we feel is an improvement over this one. This one is a more inward-facing plan. It introduces a number of dead-end streets and alleyways, and this is just here for your reference. Okay, next slide, please. So in conclusion, the applicant intends to pave a new street and alley and construct approximately 11 homes. We're doing a PD to reduce the lot size by over half and reduce the building setbacks. Staff has collaborated with both the developer and the Cooper Young Community Association to craft a plan that provides greater choice in local housing types while remaining consistent with the context of the neighborhood. The proposed configuration, as conditioned, allows for an outward-facing development that integrates into the existing neighborhood street network and increases connectivity, and we recommend approval with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Board members, anybody have any questions for Mr. Davis before we go to the applicant and the opponent? Do you have any questions for Mr. Davis at this time? Okay, hearing none, we're ready to hear from the applicant and/or their representative.
Yes, ma'am. This is Tim McCaskill, 7891 Stage Hills Boulevard. This case was originally scheduled to come before the board in October, and we held it at the time, and we've been working with the staff for the last couple of months to tweak the plan and really redesign it to make the lots face outward instead of inward. All the lots face either Elsie or the railroad right-of-way to the north. We've added a streetscape along the street that runs through the neighborhood. We've also added landscaping on the north, along the north property line and the west property line to screen the subdivision from the surrounding property. We have reduced the lots from, we had 12 lots originally, now we have 11. And this development is very similar to two other developments immediately to the west of this property that have been approved in the last couple of years. One of them was Cooper Station PD, which is the old Christie Cut Stone property. And our lots are very similar in size and configuration to that development. We feel like we've done a really good job of upgrading this plan, and we are in agreement with the staff's recommendations, and I'll save the rest of my time for any rebuttal.
Okay. Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. McCaskill at this time? Okay, hearing none, are we going to hear from the applicant, or are we ready for the opponent?
Olivia Wall.
Okay, Ms. Wall, we're ready for your name and address. Address, please.
Olivia Wall, speaking on behalf of the Cooper Young Community Association Development Committee, located at 2298 Young Avenue.
Okay, go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much for hearing from us. We fully support the conditions set forth in the staff report and feel they should be upheld if you vote to approve this plan development. The proposed redesign of the new streets is a welcome change to the application from last month, and we are happy to see landscaping and sidewalks on the plan to allow for connectivity to the existing neighborhood. However, let me read some numbers for you. 2,141, 2,175, 2,150, 2,159, 2,220, and so forth. These are not the proposed square footage of the houses. Those numbers are the approximate square footage of a handful of these lots. The average lot size proposed is 2,499 square feet. All 11 lots do not meet the minimum area. In fact, 10 of the lots are less than half of what is required in the UDC. These requirements have a purpose, and allowing a development that does not even come close to meeting those requirements should tell you that this is not appropriate. Please uphold the UDC and current zoning requirements. The extremely small lot sizes proposed are problematic to say the least and do not fit contextually within the neighborhood. New urban landscape should provide housing which contributes to the city as a whole, as well as supports the existing communities which comprise the city core. We strongly urge the board to reduce the amount of lots allowed in order to better adhere to current zoning. Thank you for hearing from us.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Board members, you have any questions for Ms. Wall? Hearing none, I'm assuming we're ready for the next opponent.
That is the end of the opposition.
Okay. All right. Then we're going to go back to the applicant for your rebuttal, and you have a little longer than 3 minutes since you didn't take your 10 minutes.
Okay. These are small lots, but they're very similar to, like I said before, to the two subdivisions to the west. Some of those lots are in the 3,000 square foot range. And also these lots are the same width as the other approved subdivisions. The houses are going to be 1.5 stories. They're going to be valued at about $400,000, which is on the high end of this area. We just feel like this is a a good use of the property. Right now, it's got a vacant commercial building on it, and this is going to be a drastic upgrade, and just hope you approve it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCaskill. Any other questions from Mr. McCaskill at this time, or Mr. McCaskill at this time? Board members, do you have any other questions? Okay, hearing none.
Yes, sorry, Mary Sharp, Vice Chair, Mary Sharp. This is JC. I did have a question for the opposition. I just wanted to be able to ask if not this use for this particular building, I mean, for this particular property, what other use would you guys propose or, want to see there as far as the community? It's a vacant parcel. What would you guys propose or want to see?
That's to Ms. Wall. That's a question for
Yes.
Ms. Wall.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for that question. We have absolutely no issue with development on this lot. We have no issue with residential development on this lot. We think there just needs to be less lots. I mean, and it's 11 lots on this very small property is an issue for us. We definitely welcome, a housing development here, though.
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions of the applicant and or the opponent? Okay, hearing none, we're going to close the public portion of the meeting, and we're ready for a motion, Dr. Pritchard.
Move approval of agenda item number 2, PD 20-13, Cooper Young.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion?
This is Brown Gill. I'd like to ask Brett Davis. Brett, tell me, I don't particularly have an issue with the lot density. What was your opinion on the lot density? And obviously, as part of 3.0, we want more density. I just want to know your thought pattern behind the current lot density.
Sure. As Mr. McCaskill referenced, these lots are in line with, adjacent residential plan developments that also have significantly reduced lot sizes. So in that sense, they're matching the pattern of the most recent development. But also when we look at contextual infill standards, the more important considerations are lot width, setbacks, the height of the houses, whether they're providing porches in line with neighboring houses on the street. So if you look at the plan, especially the houses on the existing street of Elsie, they go above the minimum width of adjacent lots and meet those setbacks. In terms of the new street, there are no adjacent lots to compare them to, but we feel that by tying them to the Landmarks Commission, placing these height limits, we will achieve something that meets the neighborhood context, while recognizing how land's been developing recently in this area, and like you said, recognizing that greater density, when done in an appropriate fashion, can be a good thing.
Thank you for that explanation. I tend to agree with you that density is not the enemy of the neighborhood. Bad design is. So, so good design with higher densities tends to work well. So I would agree with you.
Okay, is there any more discussion? Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. Mr. Whitehead, a roll call vote, please.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Wilbanks.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas. Dr. Pritchard.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon.
Yes.
Mr. Gill.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace,
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell,
Yes.
Mr. Tolles,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas, and Chair Sharp.
Yes.
We have 9 ayes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you so much. Dr. Pritchard, we're ready for number 4.
All right, this is a zoning text amendment, 20-1 annual text amendment to the Memphis and Shelby County Unified Development Code. Presenter will be Josh Whitehead. Staff recommendation is approval.
Thank you. Mr. Whitehead?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will focus on the front page of the staff report with this presentation, as the front page contains some of the more significant items, but obviously if there's any questions for any of these items, please let me know. This is the annual set of amendments to the zoning code. We try to do this once a year, but due to the, as the Queen would say, the annus horribilis, I'm no good at Latin, that we've had, it has been closer to 18 months since the last time we've gone through this process than 12 months, and that's fine. So as we go through this slide presentation, I'll focus on page 1, as well as some of the changes we've made since the initial presentation last month. So on item number 3, we'll start with the next slide, please. This goes to to some interesting, to most others not, history of this department. This department that heads the planning and zoning and land use activities of the city and the county was created almost 100 years ago, but in its modern form in 1976. And it was created as a standalone department. And that's where the confusion started, because departments usually are headed by administrators, whereas divisions are headed by directors. To add to the confusion, we called the department director a planning director, which is a term of art that you see in a lot of other communities. But because of that, the word director heading a department has caused confusion and chaos in many people's minds. So what this item would do is clear it up once and for all, rename the planning director, me, to a zoning administrator, since I had a department and not a division. And because the department has been subsumed, that department created in 1977, has been subsumed as of 1986 into a proper division, which also contains construction code enforcement, Shelby County housing, etc., and rename it as the Land Use and Development Services Department. So item 3 covers a lot of nomenclature that we hope makes the relationships between the department and the division, myself and Mr. Zena, a little less confusing. Item number 4, next slide, goes to the reference to Memphis 3.0. If you recall, the UDC was adopted at a time where we really didn't have a new, at least, or recent citywide comprehensive plan. And so what the UDC did was it said when this body, the City Council, the County Commission, the Board of Adjustment, makes decisions pursuant to the code, it shall also consult these various neighborhood plans, transportation plans, etc. So what this proposal would do, next slide, is add perhaps the most significant, if for no other reason than A, it's citywide, and B, it's the most recent, Memphis 3.0 plan to the list. It also pulls some language in from the Tennessee Code annotated into the UDC. basically, and everything in underline is a proposed language with this amendment. What we've done in red, underline, bold, is added some language pursuant to some of the public comments we received during the 90-day public review period. And that specifically says, in essence, the staff shall make a finding of consistency, but that is not the be-all and end-all finding of consistency. There are many instances in which this body could make a different finding of consistency, right? Staff finds a particular gas station to be consistent with Memphis 3.0, and then the Land Use Control Board holds a public hearing and gets perhaps more viewpoints than staff did in its creation of the staff report. Then the Land Use Control Board, can say, we respectfully disagree with staff. We do find this, or we find this to be inconsistent, right? But each board and body, City Council, Board of Adjustment, Land Use Control Board, are responsible for their own findings, and they can disagree with staff, and that's basically what the new language says. And importantly, in yellow, not new language, but language that I did want to focus on, that whatever consistency analysis is done does not supersede the approval criteria and findings of fact. Next slide. This is a table that you've seen many times before, and I'll use many times frequently. These are the findings. This is a cheat sheet to the findings of fact. In other words, when you approve a plan development, you're basically affirmatively finding that development will A, have no substantial adverse impact on the neighborhood, and B, it exhibits a better design that would be available under the straight zoning. That's one example. Well, a board member right now may be asking the question, well, what if a plan development does pass this threshold, the threshold articulated in 969 and 410.2 of the UDC? That's the far right column. But here OPD has made, DPD has made a finding of inconsistency. Well, again, the Land Use Control Board can disagree with that, but you need to get a double yes. A yes and a no, or a no and a no, doesn't cut it. It's often, this is the conversation we have when someone says, I'm trying to erect a sign downtown. I've been told I have to go to the Downtown Memphis Commission's Design Review Board and the Landmarks Commission. What if one approves and one doesn't? Well, then you don't have a sign, right? That the findings in the UDC and a consistency have to be met to achieve approval. And that's basically what item 4 covers in the proposed language to 1.9. Next slide. Item 8. We have, as we are about to discuss further on in the agenda with our proposed zoning along Summer Avenue, and also with our rezoning along Lamar Avenue, we have discovered that the CMU1 and the CMU3 zoning districts are strikingly similar, and in effect delude the needed differences between what used to be called local and neighborhood commercial, CMU1, and highway commercial, CMU3. When we first adopted the UDC, Juanez Keplinger, if y'all know her, she's the administrator of the city council staff, she said, Josh, why did y'all change all the zoning districts? We had just started to get used to what they all meant. And indeed, they were much more descriptive, at least with the commercial districts, right? Highway commercial, that sounds more intense than neighborhood commercial, right? And in hindsight, maybe we should have blended the two. We were just so eager to introduce a mixed-use zoning district, CMU, commercial mixed use, that we diminished the impact that those other words, local or neighborhood and highway, have. I say that as a backdrop to the following 2 proposed amendments. The first being that in the CMU1 zoning district, a zoning district that used to be called local commercial, that we will require a special use permit for gas stations in those zoning districts. Why? Because we feel that gas stations are more appropriate in the highway commercial zoning district. And again, I think using the old nomenclature really helps here, because where you find CMU1 on the ground, it is designed to be neighborhood commercial. It's usually on the smaller collector streets. It's on very minor intersections, if an intersection at all. So that's the purpose behind this. However, we are not going to make all the existing gas stations in CMU1 nonconformities. Nonconformities in Memphis and Shelby County is a big deal. It's a bigger deal than under the Tennessee Code Annotated. We operate under private acts. Becoming a nonconformity in Memphis and Shelby County means you're frozen. You can't add a restroom in the back because that's an expansion, and you can't expand nonconformities. What item number 8 does is it specifically says if you are a gas station in existence today in the CMU1 zoning district, rest easy, you are not a nonconformity and you may expand. So we are specifically saying this applies to future gas stations in these CMU1 zoning districts. Next slide, please. Item number 17, going again to the effort to differentiate between CMU1 and CMU3 zoning districts. We have found that CMU1 and CMU2, our middle district, commercial district, are inappropriate for the kind of intense activities that accompany used tire establishments. We have found that when it comes to new tire establishments, the same secondary effects do not exist. The kind of repair work, the kind of aesthetic issues that do accompany used tire sales establishments. So what number 17 would do is say used tire establishments are only permitted in the CMU3 zoning district. Next slide. Item number 59 will not only allow a use that requires, a project that requires a conditional use permit to be processed instead as a variance, which since both things go to the Board of Adjustment, and sometimes you need a variance for a thing that needs a conditional use permit, but also you can process that as a planned development. This is really to clarify current practice. We currently do this. This just falls under the category of let's make it explicitly clear that this is what we're doing. And the most frequent example concerns container homes, and those are houses contained in shipping containers. There's not a whole lot of things that are eligible for conditional use permits under the UDC. Container homes and mobile homes are two of the most frequent uses that fall into that category. And in fact, we have one that will be heard at one development with container homes that is scheduled to be heard by this body next month. We processed it as a planned development. Why? Because it needs lot sizes that are smaller than the zoning district permits. And the way we generally process such a request, as we just saw with the last item, is a planned development. Well, we're not also sending that proposed subdivision with smaller lots than permitted with container homes to the Board of Adjustment as a conditional use permit, right? We're not, because we feel that a planned development covers all other processes. Well, item 59 simply says that. Item number 67, next slide, is something that has been introduced since the beginning of this 90-day public review period. At least it's been massaged twice. And this goes to refilings. Currently, one cannot refile if one receives a rejection by the City Council or County Commission. And what we're talking about here are specifically planned developments and special use permits. So if you go for a gravel mining operation, or something as intense as that, or something as less intense as a subdivision with smaller than permitted lots, and you're filing a plan development, you have to go all the way up and get a vote by the city council or the county commission before you go placed in a 18-month penalty box. What this proposal would do is two things. One is expand the 18-month penalty box to 5 years, and it would also change the triggering mechanism for that penalty box. Instead of it requiring a vote by the city council, a rejection by the city council or the county commission, it only requires a vote by the land use control board. And the case that brought this immediately to our attention was the case at Norris and Hernando, but we had a similar case with a gravel mining operation on Rosemark Road that this could apply to. So based upon public commentary on both of those cases and others that maybe we just didn't hear about, that brought us the language of item number 67. Finally, Madam Chair, next slide, we have removed from consideration 3 items that were originally on your front page, and now they're down at the very end of your front page because they've been removed. Item number 12, which would have allowed a TDEC-approved reclamation plan for a resource extraction facility to count as a local reclamation plan. We've removed that, so now at least under the language of the code, we will leave it as is. Number 2, item 53, which would have allowed plan developments in the 3 areas of town that currently prohibit them. We've dropped that from consideration, although I have discussed with interested parties that I would like to revisit that in a year, because what it has the effect of doing is sending the Board of Adjustment projects that they're currently capable of processing, and it's the same staff, it's the Division of Planning and Development. But what you are doing is you're requiring a finding of hardship for those cases, which sometimes is appropriate, but sometimes may not be. So the impetus behind number 53 was to allow for projects that are just sheer projects, large projects. They don't meet the variance test, perhaps, but they do meet the plan development test to be allowed to be processed as plan developments. But there were concerns maybe of the ramifications of that item, so we're going to hold that off for a year. And finally, Madam Chair, speaking of holding off for a year, number 73, which would have clarified what we do with narrow, non-conforming lots. Originally, I wanted to clarify this to allow them, if they are a platted narrow lot, at least 25 feet in width, go ahead and allow it, explicitly allow it. Well, I got some feedback on that, and so then my second proposal was, okay, explicitly disallow it. Well, I got even more feedback from other people. So what I would like to do between now and the next 12-ish months is create a map and look at where all these narrow lots lie in the city and in the county, if they are in the county, and see if we can create some kind of nuanced approach. Nuanced being perhaps where we land is, hey, if you have a narrow lot and you're on a block, say in Orange Mound, that most of the existing lots have narrow houses and the narrow lots are in effect and have been in effect, maybe 51% is the magic number. And if you are on a block with 51%, then you can use your narrow lot. On the other hand, if not, you can't. Again, that's a very preliminary idea, and we'll get to more hard and fixed language in the next year or so. But for now, we're going to leave the non-conforming lots section of the UDC alone. With that, Madam Chair, I'm available for any questions. I know we have a few speakers, so I'll relinquish the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For two reasons, I'll let you go over your 10 minutes. Number one, this long presentation. And number two, because you're the boss. So, does anybody have any questions of Mr. Whitehead at this time before we go to supporters and or opposition? Any questions? Okay, hearing none, I'm ready for the first speaker.
Lou Wardlaw.
Okay, Mr. Wardlaw.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Give me your address, your
certainly.
remarks.
Yes, Lou Wardlaw, 6410 Poplar Avenue, Memphis, Tennessee. And I represent NPI, and we've had many discussions with staff and amongst our client team about this. I've let Mr. Whitehead know yesterday and told him I would advise the board as such that after reviewing DPD staff responses to our clients' letters of opposition and concern and following a very productive teleconference that Mr. Whitehead joined with us on Monday, my clients now feel that what objections they had been sufficiently addressed either through specific revisions which are held in yellow in the staff report or staff's and Mr. Whitehead's agreement to hold certain of the items for a year. With these changes and assuming they're reflected in the motion, we don't have any further comment or concern at this time. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's all I have given the changes that Mr. Whitehead has announced. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Wardlaw? Okay, hearing none, I'm assuming we're ready for the opposition.
Oh, there's one more in support, Cassandra Dixon.
Okay, Ms. Dixon, your address and your comments.
Good morning. My name is Cassandra Dixon. My address is 1083 Ansdale. I was wanting to speak on the proposed changes to with the amendments to the law. As you all know, we are the Norris Road, Hernando, Prospect Park, 6 other communities, we all fought to keep a gas station out of our neighborhood. I'm here to request change to the law that currently exists regarding these gas station developers, different permits. Due to these laws that are currently on the books, the developer, Mr. Amon Daviji, he became a recurring problem by continually rescinding and reapplying for permits to avoid community opposition. This developer received 2 votes of rejection from the Planning and Development Office. This developer received 2 votes of rejection from the Land Use Control Board. And twice this developer received extensions. And twice this developer has withdrawn before the Memphis City Council. This developer was allowed to do this according to the current laws that are on the books. Our community is in agreement with the amendment that are proposed. We are asking for change because no community should be allowed to go through what we have gone through and have endured for the last 3 years. Please amend the law to include those developers who continually withdraw and those developers who force neighborhoods to fight the same projects over and over. Again, we are in full support of those amendment changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do you have any answers to her, Mr. Whitehead, before we go to the opposition? I know you're going to get 3 minutes rebuttal, but do we go right on to the opposition now?
Yeah, let's have all the public speakers speak first.
Okay. We're ready for the opposition. Please state your name and your comments.
Britton White.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Britton White, and I live at 10095 Santa Rosa Drive. in Atoka, but I've got an Atoka mailing address, but I live in northeast Shelby County. My question really is more procedural than anything else for the Land Use Control Board, and that is, if you could, please help me understand how the Land Use Control Board is able to make a decision on an application that is incomplete and or is not in line with the Unified Development Code. So an example is a recent gravel pit extension for modified 4 years when the Unified Development Code only allows for 2 years. I'd like to understand how that is possible since it falls outside of the UDC.
Okay, thank you. We'll have those answers as soon as we hear all of the opposition. Next opposer, please.
Don Jones.
Mr. Jones, address and your comments.
Thank you, Chair Lady Sharp. For the record, I am John Donald. Please call me Don Jones. Address 1763 Peach Avenue, Memphis. And I am here on behalf of the Evergreen Historic District Association. I have 4 items that I'm requesting some additional language for. To begin with item 24 and dialing down here to 3.9.2b parentheses 4. We respectfully ask that you add the language, if this amendment is approved, an additional statement should be added that requires notification to the appropriate neighborhood association or associations. Next item, 3.9.2h. We are in full support of this change, but again, we ask that language to be added that reads, where applicable, the Landmarks Commission shall determine the appropriate location for garages. Moving now to item 64, item 9.3.2d. This has to do with the community impact statement, but I don't know if that's meant to be understood as only the community impact statement. I believe it could also be added to comments received by staff, and we would, in that vein, we would like the following language to be added. Any CIS or public comment received after the staff report has been published will be referenced at the public hearing and added to the materials that are forwarded to the legislative body or bodies for their review. And finally, Madam Chair, members of the board, 9.3.2e. This deals with, as Josh referred to it, exigent circumstances around the required public meeting, which has been allowed to be put in abeyance because of the COVID situations. I would like the language in this area to be moved from a may to a shall, and then to be read as any applicant coming before the Land Use Control Board or the Board of Adjustment shall, in lieu of a neighborhood meeting, make contact with the appropriate neighborhood association or associations that represent the subject property. The applicant shall maintain and submit to staff evidence that such a meeting has been requested, and all emails and texts associated with that meeting be shared with the staff. In the case of the Board of Adjustment, where footnote number 2 applies, said meeting can be waived. Finally, Madam Chair, respectfully to Mr. Whitehead, who's just done a fantastic job with this and has shown a great degree of patience, I'd also like to offer a future amendment for him to consider, which deals with posting public notice signs for Board of Adjustment cases that involve use variances and conditional use permits. I know many of you, I've served with many of you for quite a while. I want to wish you all a safe and happy holiday season, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Okay, we're ready for Mr. Belinkie as opposition, and then we'll see if the board has any questions of any of the opposition.
Mr. Belinkie is not on the call.
Okay, thank you. All right, board members, do you have any questions of the opposition and or the support? Okay, we're ready for your rebuttal, Mr. Whitehead.
I don't know if you had, Madam Chair, you had asked if I had any comments to Ms. Dixon, other than I appreciate her comments, and sounds like we're in simpatico on that. To Mr. White's question, I believe both I and the attorney for the division have on multiple occasions responded to that question. And to Mr. Jones, I didn't catch everything. Two things I did hear that I don't see as a problem were the comment to 392H, where the Landmarks Commission is taking into consideration the contextual infill standards. I don't know if that's necessary because the UDC currently says where there's a conflict between design guidelines and the UDC, the design guidelines for a historic district govern. And so the Landmarks Commission, are going to be reviewing garage placement primarily pursuant to their design guidelines and not so much the contextual infill standards. What the amendment to the contextual infill standards does is it says the Landmarks Commission, if they are reviewing a garage placement or a porch placement and approving something, then they may waive, if doing that garage placement or that porch placement is in some way in contradiction to the contextual infill standards, that's fine. That they are not required to follow the contextual infill standards because their design guidelines trump anyway. And the CIS, I'm going to have to get with Mr. Jones on that language. That was the intent, but obviously it would help if we specifically said, yeah, the community impact statement wasn't able to make the packet that went to the Land Use Control Board for whatever reason, but we can and will, and maybe it would be good to codify that we shall forward that into the City Council packet or County Commission packet, whatever the case may be. The CIS language, I think we can reflect in the motion for approval. And finally, the language pertaining to, exigent circumstances. This is proposed 932E on page 29, Madam Chair. All the mays I see, I would like to keep as mays versus shalls, because a neighborhood meeting may be conducted through electronic means if holding it in person is impractical due to an ongoing public health crisis. I think if you have proper mask wearing, if we're talking about this public health crisis, and proper social distancing, that a public hearing, particularly if it's if it's being attended by a dozen or so people, which is generally a good neighborhood meeting for a lot of our cases, I think in that kind of context, we may prefer it to be in person. So I think adding a shall there may not do us good. And then the second may I see is, in addition, a neighborhood meeting may be held after the Land Use Control Board votes on the matter, but before the governing body. Well, again, I wouldn't want that to be shall, because we would always prefer it to be before the Land Use Control Board. The purpose of the may there would be only if something terrible and exigent has happened, may you hold it after. So I think if the maker of the motion, my suggestion would be, if the maker of motion would like to add the language proposed and then use the magic words regarding the community impact statement, we could capture that language into this set of amendments and forward it on to the City Council and County Commission thusly. And I would need to get with Mr. Jones on that exact language. With that, I think I'm concluded with my, as you called it, rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Whitehead, board members? Any questions for Mr. Whitehead?
And I apologize. I was speaking into my phone during that whole time, and I realized the speaker was 4 feet away. Were you able to, I trust you were able to hear me.
Yeah, we could hear you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So at this time, if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to close the public portion of this meeting. Dr. Pritchard, if you can figure out how to repeat that, make a motion to approve
All right.
the said recommendations. It's
all right. I move approval of agenda item number 4, zoning text amendment 20-1, as proposed by the zoning director in his comments.
Second.
Okay, I hear a second from Ms. Wilbanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? We have a motion on the floor. We have a second. We need discussion if there is any. Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote. We need a roll call.
Mr. McKinnon?
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Gill?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Tolles?
Yes.
Ms. Wilbanks?
Yes.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
That's 10 ayes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. And we're ready for number 5, Dr. Pritchard.
Agenda item number 5, SAC 16-03. This is a correspondence item in the medical district. It's for a time extension for the closure of alley north of Union, south of Monroe, and west of Cleveland. Staff recommends approval with conditions.
Thank you. Is the applicant present?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then we're ready to hear the case from the staff member.
Good morning, everybody. Teresa Shelton from Memphis Shelby County Division of Planning and Development. Basically, this is a time extension, 3-year time extension to complete a closure at the location in question. Basically, the applicant is seeking a 3-year time extension to allow the applicant and / developer the additional time to work with the city engineer and MLGW on the final designs and approval of the proposed mixed-use development. The applicant's intent is to additionally close part of a 15 feet east, I think it's 15 feet east-west alley located between Claybrook Street and Cleveland Street, 134 feet north of Union Avenue, containing 0.10 acres, unnamed public alley, in agreement with the engineering recommendation comments. If you also notice, back on February the 11th, 2016, the Memphis Shelby County Land Use Control Board recommended approval of closure of an existing alley known as case number SAC 1603, and where it was approved by City Council on April 19, 2016. The alley closure will increase patron and employee safety to the bank. OPD staff supports the applicant's request for the 3-year time extension. So it's my staff recommendation is with approval. If you'll go to slide 4 for me, please. Okay. Basically, this just shows you where the alley is. This is an unnamed alley looking westward, west toward Claybrook Street. And on the other side on the right, unnamed alley looking north toward Monroe. If you go to the next one, please.
And Teresa, if I may,
sir.
Madam Chair, if you press refresh, that'll bring your YouTube closer to current time.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Just FYI.
All right. Okay, on the next slide, it's just basically unnamed alley or Cleveland Street. If you go to the next one, and this shows the alley closure plat. And basically, this is their plat that they're proposing with this that shows in that dark line there where it is. And that will conclude my presentation for this.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shelton. Do we have any questions of Ms. Shelton at this time, board members? Okay, hearing none, we are ready to hear from the applicant, Ms. Bazar.
Thank you, Chair Lady Sharp. Brenda Salamito Bazer, Salamito Land Planning, 1779 Kirby Parkway, Memphis. Thank you to OPD for their time and attention to this application. And again, the purpose of this application is for a time extension. As a result, since 2016, we have been working on a proposal for the redevelopment of the property. And an essential part of this is a partial alley closure. Now, First Tennessee, or now First Horizon, is the majority property owner of the block. And the rationale is only partial is so that those properties that are not included as a part of our proposed development still have access out through the alley that leads to Claybrook. And also, many of them have direct access to either Union Avenue, Claybrook, or onto Monroe. So I know we had a letter of opposition, but I want to just speak briefly to that if you look on that proposed plat that is being shown on your screens right now, the property that is facing Union Avenue and has the property just before you get to that closure, they still have access out to Claybrook through the still publicly dedicated alley, and they also have access directly to Union Avenue. So we were very careful and deliberate with this application to not make any changes since 2016, and to also ensure the properties that were not part of the redevelopment of this site were not negatively impacted by the closure. So I'll save any time that I have for rebuttal or to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Board members, do you have any questions of Ms. Bazar at this time? Okay, hearing none, we're ready for the opposition. Mr. Sloan, if you'd give us your address and your comments.
Hi, this is David Sloan, and I live at 8254 Whispering Pine Circle in Germantown. Thank you for allowing me to speak today on behalf of my mother, Thirds of Mobley Sloan, and the managing members of Mobley LLC. They share the property with the adjoining property owners. The property's been in the family since it was a home of my great-grandparents, which predates the ownership of the surrounding owners. My grandfather, Joseph Mobley, delivered me across the street at the hospital in 1967, as well as many other babies at that hospital and many others. Our property has been a coffee shop for the last 60 years. We're against the closure of the alley for SAC 16-03, as it will adversely affect the value use as well as affect the drainage of our property at 1308 Union Avenue. And when you close off the alley on one side, if the other alley is blocked by First Horizon's traffic on the other branch or Wells Fargo's, then if the owners or lessee is trying to escape, but for some reason has to leave, it blocks off the way of getting out of the back of the property. So that's my comment for today, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Sloan? Hearing none, Ms. Baser, we're ready for your rebuttal.
Thank you, Madam. Again, the remainder of the alley was left open for the very specific purposes to not impede the flow of traffic to the properties that were not going to be involved in the redevelopment of the First Horizon properties. And I know my client has reached out in the last couple of days once we knew that there was a letter of opposition, and left a voicemail. I don't know if they were able to speak or not, but we will continue to work with anyone during this process.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions for Ms. Bazar? Any questions for Ms. Bazar? Hearing none, we're going to close the public portion of the meeting. Can we get a motion, please, Dr. Pritchard?
Move approval of agenda item number 5, SAC 16-03.
Second, Toles.
Okay, we have a second by Mr. Toles and a motion. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion amongst the board members? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote, and that would be a roll call.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace.
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell.
Yes.
Ms. Wilbanks.
Yes.
Mr. Toles.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming.
Yes.
Mr. Gill.
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon.
Aye.
And Chair Sharp.
Yes.
10 ayes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Dr. Pritchard, we're ready for number 8.
Agenda item number 8, PD 20-15, Midtown, mixed-use development at the southwest corner of Cooper and Central. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Sharp?
Yes.
Ms. Sharp, this is Mr. Fleming. Please show me recused from this case.
Okay. Thank you. All right. We know that the applicant is here, so we are ready for the presentation by the staff.
Jeffrey Penzis, Planning and Development. This is PD 2015. The applicant is RE&D Investments, LLC. The site is generally located along York Street, south of Central Avenue, west of Cooper Street, and east of Tanglewood Street. And the request is a mixed-use plan development. Next slide, please. So this just shows the location in the Midtown neighborhood and also the location for the vicinity map with the public notices that were mailed. Next slide, please. So this shows the zoning map. The site is generally zoned employment. There are sections of commercial mixed use 1, residential urban 1, historic, which is the Cooper Young Historic District, which is at the far western portion of the site, north of York Avenue. And the land use map shows the current land use in the area, which is quite the mixture of industrial, commercial, single-family, multifamily, vacant, and institutional. Next slide, please. And these are just some site photos of the currently existing conditions of the site. And next slide, these are additional site photos. And next slide, this shows the proposed concept plan. We can see there's different buildings. The ones fronting Central Avenue, there's one that will be 4 stories. That's the AA one, and then the AC will be 5 stories. And then there's another building, AE, which fronts Cooper Street. That one's proposed to be 4 stories, which would be retail flex. Then if we go onto the north side of York Street, there's the AD building, which would be 5 stories, which is also a retail flex. And then AB is further west on York Street. That's proposed to be 6 floors, which would be parking and retail flex on the first floor, and the second floor would be parking, and the third and sixth floor would be residential units. And then on the south side of York Street, there's the AF building at the corner of Tanglewood Street, and that is proposed to be 7 floors with the first floor parking and retail flex, and the floors 2 to 4 will have parking, and 5 to 7 will have residential units. And lastly, there's the AG building, which is just east of that AF building, which will be on the south side of York again, and that is 6 floors, and it is retail flex on the first floor and residential units on floors 2 to 6. And next slide shows conceptual elevations. And next slide, these are additional conceptual elevations. And the next slide is the last of the conceptual elevations. This is the 7 floor building would be the one at the corner of Tanglewood and York. And the next slide, these are just some conceptual renderings. And the next slide is another conceptual rendering. And the next slide, this is about the Memphis 3.0. So the proposed application is congruent with the degree of change of designation, as it will be allowing a greater mix of uses, increased density and building height, consolidating smaller lots into larger parcels that are more attractive for development, and improving civic assets. And although part of the site falls within the ANS, Anchor Neighborhood Future Land Use Designation, some of the also parts are the parcels fall within the Anchor Neighborhood Mixed Use section. Future Land Use Designation, which supports the application. Additionally, the request will sustain the Anchor of Memphis 3.0, which supports infill growth and development around the Anchor. And based on this information provided, the proposal is consistent with the Memphis 3.0 general plan. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the proposed high-quality mixed-use development would be a significant improvement for and investment in the community. It would be a showcase of economic development in this neighborhood, and the proposed development will not unduly injure or damage the use, value, and enjoyment of surrounding property, nor unduly hinder or prevent the development of surrounding property in accordance with the current development policies and plans of the city. Next slide, please. And with that, we recommend approval with outline plan conditions, which can be found on pages 21 to 23 of the staff report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Penzis. Board members, do we have any questions for Mr. Penzis before the applicant makes her presentation? No questions? Okay, Ms. Bazar, we're ready for your presentation. Ms. Bazar?
Mr. Britnam, Dedrick Britnam.
Okay. Go ahead with your address and your remarks. Mr. Britnam, are you there?
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Dedrick Britnam. My address is 3385 Airways Boulevard, Suite 229. Thank you, Madam Chair, and your fellow board members for your service to this community. It is a great deal of effort and time to listen to the Land Use Control Board cases. This case is interesting, and this is really an opportunity, a golden opportunity to polish a diamond in the rough. If the staff could go back to the vicinity map, please. That's on page 5 of the staff report. Yes. I want to take a minute to discuss the situation of this site. As you can see, it's nestled or sandwiched in between two railroad rights-of-way, two railroad beds, one to the north and one to the south. The orientation of this project is to Central Avenue and Cooper Street. That's the orientation. With the successful development of this property, the district will become known as the Central and Cooper District. It will complement the commercial uses that are presently to the east and to the north of this particular site. Now, if you could go to the slideshow that the applicant has submitted, please. Thank you. As you can see, as you will read, this is the development team. Fleming is the architects. The civil engineering firm is the Reeves firm. And we have all these people available here this morning to discuss and answer any questions that you may have. Now, going to the next slide, what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Scott Fleming to discuss the design aspects of the project.
Good morning, Board and Chairwoman Sharp. This is Scott Fleming, Fleming Architects, 5101 Wheelis. I'm here today to spend a couple moments and tell you about the way we approach this design for Central Yards. We're extremely happy to take this blighted piece of property and to be able to redeem it and create something really beautiful that will be an asset for the community. First of all, we have incorporated new urbanism and Memphis 3.0 guidelines and principles into our design. Namely, we have broken the site up into walkable, scalable blocks that will create a much more urban-friendly, pedestrian-friendly environment. We've also added traffic measures to mitigate traffic from moving anywhere but towards Cooper and Central by the inclusion of two streets, one connecting Central at the north to York at the south, and a private service drive connecting Cooper to the newly constructed drive running north and south. We also created a roundabout on the west end, which will divert traffic back to the east and toward Cooper instead of southward on Tanglewood. Next slide, please. This is an enlarged site plan which begins to show how these buildings are broken down. Please note that we have broken the parking down into two structured parking components. All of the structured parking is hidden behind building facades, which is part of new urbanism principles. We also have streetscapes that will adhere to the Midtown District overlay requirements, which include street trees that will be native to the area, along with proper lighting and the proper widths to allow a really inviting space for the area. We've also included a plaza, an urban plaza on the right side there at Cooper and York, which will be a hub of activity, not only for this development, but for the entire Overton Square, Cooper Young area. It'll be a place for maybe 5Ks to begin from that point. There's also a pedestrian crosswalk that we will propose from York across Cooper Street. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. We want to just show the scale of the project. First of all, we want this building to fit and seem like it's been there a long time. So we've matched and complemented the scale of the existing buildings around the site, namely the Lululemon building and Hazlet Design Studio building and Urban Outfitters. We've taken the brick, the metal siding, and the glass found in those structures and incorporated them into our design. You can also see the public art, the Choose 901 on the side of the building. We have places for public art, and also we're going to spruce up the public art under the railroad track overpass, which really provides a barrier to the west towards Central Gardens. Next slide, please. This is a view from Central looking south toward the new street that we're going to construct. These are accurately drawn and rendered streetscapes which show the width, the size, the scale that we are proposing for the project. And it shows an inviting environment, open, activated area with the transparent ground floors, which activates the area and it provides energy and a nice place to come visit. Next slide, please. A couple more slides. Just wanted to show you a close-up view of what that urban plaza would look like. We're working on the right balance of hardscape and greenscape to provide just the exact best type of space we need to accommodate the different uses that will be found there. Next slide, please. This is a view on York looking west. This is a 6-story building at the corner of the new drive, which peels off to the right, in York, which you're looking west. You can see how the grade rises to the west toward the end of the street. The buildings on the left, the 7-story building, it's actually a 6-story building above grade, above Tanglewood. The bottom floor is below grade. Therefore, it's a 6-story building above grade on Tanglewood. And so that really reduces the height. In this district, a 6-story height is allowed. Dedrick can talk to that in more detail. Next slide, please. This is the last slide I'd like to speak to, and this shows the scale of the building from Elsie to the south. Elsie is, the elevation is lower than the York Avenue elevation at our building, which is at the top of the street. You can see the line of the elevated abandoned rail line. The actual ground floor of the building that you see dotted in is 15 feet below that dotted line. So you're only seeing 6 stories on Tanglewood to the left. That line of trees is existing that you see in that slide, and all of those will be saved as part of this project, which will provide a buffer to the residents to the south. So in conclusion, I think we've really addressed the approach to the design as a new urbanism solution, meets Memphis 3.0, and we've really thought about the context and how we have addressed our neighbors around all areas of the site. Dedrick, back to you.
Okay, thank you. And the next slide, please. Okay. This is our closing slide to give you an idea of the potential economic impact of this project. As it says, is some 53,000 square foot of commercial space, residential units 348, approximately 615 parking spaces with over 100 available during peaks for public parking during peak times in the evenings. The investment factor is approximately $60 million and it tax generated.
Madam Chair, the applicant has 30 seconds remaining.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you can finish reading the rest of that slide. And I want to say this, that the developers from day one have had an interest in developing a project that fits into the neighborhood, that is friendly to the neighborhood, and we think we've accomplished that. We appreciate your time, and we ask for your approval. By the way, we have also agreed to all of the conditions put forth by the Department of Planning and Development. Thank you.
And thank you. Okay, board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Britnum and or Mr. Fleming? Do you have any questions of the two applicants? Hearing none, we're ready to hear from the two opponents or the two people in opposition. If you'd give us your address and your comments, please.
Of the two, only Olivia Wall is here, so she has the full time.
Hello.
Wall.
Hi, my name is Olivia Wall, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Cooper Young Community Association Development Committee located at 2298 Young Avenue.
Okay, go ahead.
Once again, thank
Sorry,
you so much for hearing
before
from us.
she begins, I did just realize Charles Blinky did just join the call. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. We'll hear from him next.
Like I was saying, thank you so much for hearing from us again. Although we are generally in support of this application and we welcome the development on this site, we are in opposition to the 7-story height variance, which we strongly believe is inappropriate and contextually unfit. As it stands, 6 stories, although technically allowable under the UDC, will still tower over the neighborhood and the existing buildings. Although the applicant argues placement in the rear of the development and the existing tree line is adequate to shield it, our major concern is for residents who live directly to the south of the development, for which these towering buildings will be front and center, particularly in the winter months when there are no leaves on the trees that were just shown. It will irrevocably disrupt the value and enjoyment of these adjacent properties, as well as dominate and permanently mark Cooper Young's northern border if approved. We urge the board to deny a height variance due to its inappropriateness within the context of the neighborhood. Reducing the number of units and thus the number of parking spaces would easily allow for this plan to move forward with less height. The applicant wants to build in Cooper Young because it's a community we have developed over 100 plus years. Adjustments to better fit within our community, such as reducing the height, would allow the development to contribute to what we have built rather than detract from our sense of place and community. Approve this project by all means, but we ask you to add a condition which limits the height to 6 stories before doing so. Thank you for hearing from us.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear from Mr. Belinsky before we ask any questions, so as to keep the continuity going here. Mr. Belinsky?
Good morning. This is Charles Belinsky, 5019 Wilshire Avenue. I have a couple of points. The most significant to me is the issue of drainage, especially since we're talking about some below-grade parking. As usual, there is no drainage study. There is a lot of vague language about doing something, but this is a large piece of land in an overburdened drainage basin, and I think that the permit or the approval should require specifically that it should be deferred until a drainage plan is completed, and I believe that that will require a large underground vault on underneath the plaza at the northwest corner of Cooper and Young, similar to the vault that was constructed under the parking structure in Overton Square. I have two other points I want to make. The one which largely restates what has been said is the Tanglewood facade, especially that 7-story building. Not only is it out of scale, but the lower floor, 4 floors of it are parking, so there's no activation. People are looking at a blank wall, not at windows of residences. Furthermore, we've just approved a project on Tanglewood and Elsie that's going to be impacted by virtue of its proximity. Now, this building AF supposedly is only going to have an entrance into the alley, but there is simply, or the new street, but there's simply too much traffic that's going to be going in and out of that parking structure, and they will inevitably be routing traffic onto Tanglewood. Of course, Elsie is now a through street. Other developments have been approved so that all traffic trying to move in that southwest direction will be filtering through the residential neighborhood Elsie to Barksdale. And the final point I want to make concerns the size of the units. We recently had a big project, in many ways different but similar, in Binghamton on the north side of Broad Street. People went in thinking it was going to increase the community, that families were going to move in. As it turns out, the developer is building studios and 1-bedrooms. Cooper Young has a family character. The reasons it works is because people and their children are comfortable there. Unless a specific percentage of 3 and 4 bedroom units are required in this development approval, we're going to end up with a bunch of single person or 2 people households, which don't create the kind of community that Cooper Young, and in this case, the Midtown area adjacent to Cooper Young, is known for. So those are the reasons why I feel this should be reworked, or at least we should get more detail on the size of the apartment units and how draining will be coped for. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, board members, do you have any questions of Ms. Wall or Mr. Belanky? Do you have any questions from the 2 opponents? Hearing none, then we're ready to go back to the applicant, Mr. Britnum, perhaps Mr. Fleming, with any rebuttals.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the slides could go back to the vicinity map, please.
Okay.
Page 5. Dedrick Britnum, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Staff report, page 5. Yes. As you see, the railroad right-of-way to the south, that's over 100 feet distance between the property line of the project and the property line of the residential property to the south. Could the staff go to slide number 13 of the staff report, please? Number 13, showing the Central Yard site elevations, please. Is that all right? Number 13 would be the north elevation. I believe that's one more, please. And one more. There you go. Okay, as you can see, this is the north elevation on York Street. This is the so-called 7-story building. On the east, it is seven stories. On the west, it's 6 stories when you count above ground grade. And as you can see, the property slopes to the west. So this building will be recessed into that slope and produce a 6-story building on the western property, Tanglewood. Now, the Midtown overlay allows 6 stories. So this is in keeping with the Midtown overlay relative to the stories. Now, there are several properties in Memphis that have towers adjacent to residential property. The first one is the Monarch, which is at 274 South Highland Street. It's 12 stories, and it directly abuts residential, single-family residential. The Citizen at Union and McLean is 8 or 9 stories, and it is directly abutting residential. The Kimbrough Towers in Union Avenue in Kimbrough is 8 or 9 stories. That's in Midtown, and that abuts residential. On North Parkway, we have the Woodmont Towers and Gardens. That is a 12-story building, and it directly abuts residential property. And the granddaddy of them all is Crosstown. Crosstown has 14 floors and directly abuts residential to the north. And the site abuts residential to the south as well. With that said, we think this is a terrific project. It's going to look like 6 stories. When you look at it from the south, it'll look like 6 stories, which is allowed in the Midtown overlay. With that said, Madam Chair, thank you for the time to present, and we respectfully ask for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Britton or Mr. Fleming? Do you have any questions? Okay, hearing none, then I'm going to close the public portion of this meeting. And Dr. Pritchard, we are ready for a motion.
Move approval of agenda item number 8, PD 20-15.
Second.
We heard a second from Ms. Wilbanks. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
This is Brown Gill. I'd like to, I love this site. I think that it's a great site. And I actually, at one point, I tried to pursue this site. I think that the design team and the development team have done a fantastic job designing buildings that fit, that look urban and that fit the neighborhood. And I think the fact that you don't have a long list of neighbors down Central and in Central Gardens that want to oppose this says so much to what good design this is. So I just wanted to say I'll be supporting this, and I applaud the entire development team for taking this risk. So, nice job, guys.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair, Toles. Just like to comment on the opposition had a problem with the drainage, but it's my understanding that the engineering division will actually look at that, and they will probably have an on-site detention for the drainage, and I don't think that will be a problem once they get that detention.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Any other discussion, I'm sorry. Is there any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote, and that would be a roll call vote, please. Mr. Whitehead?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Pritchard. Ms. O'Connell.
Yes.
Mr. Gill.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Toles. Ms. Wilbanks.
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard.
Yes.
Mr. Toles.
Yes.
Got you. And Chair Sharp.
Yes.
That's 9 ayes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Now we're ready for number 12, Dr. Pritchard.
Agenda item number 12, Z20-10, Highland Heights and Berclair, comprehensive rezoning of Summer between 1, Holmes and Sevier, and 2, Nova Reese and Stratford. Staff recommendation is approval.
Okay, is the applicant present? Is the applicant present on
Yes.
number? Okay, we're ready
Yes,
for the
applicant
staff
is here.
report. Ready for the staff report.
Okay, good morning. This is Brett Davis again with case Z20-10 as stated. Next slide, please. Okay, so the applicant here is the Department of Comprehensive Planning of the Division of Planning and Development, represented by Administrator Cash. It is a comprehensive rezoning, which is a category that this board recently reviewed a similar application for along Lamar. That application concerned 200 parcels. This application concerns 70. And the purpose is to bring these portions of Summer closer in line with the Memphis 3.0 general plan. Next slide. So I'm just going to give a brief presentation here I'll point out that of the 70 parcels proposed to be rezoned, 42 would be downzoned to CMU 1, and 28 would be rezoned to MU, or mixed use. And that's interesting or remarkable because mixed use is a zoning district that until now has been found only within the Uptown district. So it's a special purpose zoning district that brings buildings closer to the street. It's meant to be a physically integrated commercial district. I'm going to hand over my presentation to the applicant, Administrator Cash. LUD staff is recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. This is Ashley Cash, Office of Comprehensive Planning, Department of Comprehensive Planning, address 125 North Main Street, Memphis, Tennessee. And today, you can go to the next slide, please. Today, I just wanted to share a little bit of information while we are requesting the rezoning for certain parcels along Summer Avenue. And so this is in response to a demolition permit moratorium on churches over 50 years old that was imposed by the City Council on August 18th of this year. The moratorium requested that DPD, our division, provide a report outlining different uses and zoning, less intense zoning districts that would protect the existing character of the areas, protect the historic character of the churches, to try to think about how the destruction of historic churches may erode the neighborhood, and also ensure that future development is consistent in character with the existing land use around it. And so Mr. Davis already discussed the authority that the UDC gives the city to make comprehensive rezoning. Recently, in October of this year, the City Council adopted a resolution authorizing our division to rezone certain parcels along Summer between Holmes and Sevier and Berclair and Stratford, which are two different areas along the same corridor. And as Mr. Davis said, we're proposing to rezone 70 parcels along Summer Avenue to either CMU1 or CMU3. Public notice was mailed to each property owner, and letters were mailed to neighborhood groups. If you can go to the next slide, please. The next slide, and we won't stay here long. Just a vicinity map of Summer Avenue corridor that kind of goes all the way out to the city limits. You can go to the next slide. And it's tiny stars. If you kind of recall where that yellow line was, there are 4 stars. A couple may appear to be overlapping, but these just show the 4 historic churches that this report and kind of the rezoning is centered around: New Tyler AME, Highland Heights United Methodist Church, or formerly Highland Heights. The property was is no longer Highland Heights Church as we knew it. Berclair Church of Christ, and then Berclair Baptist Church. It used to be noted these only include churches that were built 50 years before the resolution and are not in a residential zoning district. Churches located in residential zoning districts are assumed to have a certain amount of protections from auto-related uses and other more intense uses, commercial uses that may not be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So the focus was really on these 4 churches that and you can go to the next slide, these 4 churches that provide some historic value to the neighborhood that kind of fall outside of some existing protections of that the UDC kind of already offers to the area. These are just images so that you can see, obviously, that these churches have some historic merit. Each church is named. I'm not going to go through each of them, but these are the 4 churches that we just talked about on the previous slide. And you can go to the next slide, and we'll kind of get to the meat of it in the last, I think, 3 or 4 slides that I had. Okay. And so we're proposing a rezoning in two areas. This is what is referred to in the staff report, throughout the staff report, as Area 1. It is along Summer Avenue from Holmes to Sevier Street. So what we're doing, we've got two different colors here. The red shading shows the parcels that are, well, let me step back. All of the parcels that are shaded either red or purple are currently CMU3. The red shading shows the parcels that are proposed to be rezoned from CMU3 to 1. And so what that does, we believe it protects existing land uses in this proposed rezoning. I'm sorry, is somebody mentioning me, Mr. Davis? Okay, I heard some feedback. I didn't know if somebody was trying to interject. The proposed rezone parcels that are going from CMU3 to 1, we are trying to, for the auto-related uses, storage uses that are not typically associated with neighborhood scale commercial, which is generally we think about as low-intensity commercial. In CMU1, they would not be allowed by right. And so those are the parcels that are shaded red right now. The parcels that are in the purple, it essentially, we are recommending rezoning those from CMU3 to MU, the mixed-use zoning district. The idea there is to protect the existing urban environment. A lot of the parcels that are, the buildings that are kind of in that purple footprint are closer to the street, they're more pedestrian oriented, and so we, by employing this zoning district, the mixed use, MU, future development should have the same scale. The same thing in this one, auto service and auto related uses would not be allowed by right. And so just protecting a little bit of that neighborhood, commercial, existing buildings and historic buildings. And what's currently there right now, gas stations, auto stores, dollar stores, thrift, and some other types of commercial establishments. You can go to the next slide. And the next slide is our Area 2, which referred to as Area 2 in the staff report. It is Nova Reef on the west to Stratford on the east along Summer Avenue. You can see in this area, this is about 13 parcels. All of these are existing CMU3 as well. We are recommending rezoning these to CMU1. And just as we discussed on the previous slide, that would protect the existing land use, the existing development in the area. In this scenario, under CMU1, auto-related uses, storage uses, other uses that we typically don't think about when we think about neighborhood scale commercial would not be allowed by right. So going to a less intense commercial districts. And in this area, we've got a couple of barber beauty shops, a church, a couple of parking lots, and some fast food. And so just trying to, as future development comes along, and ensure that it is less intense and respectful and in character with the existing land use, existing buildings. Can you go to the next slide? And I've just got, I think, two more slides here. And they talk really about the future land use. And so we were directed by council to pursue this rezoning, to think about ways to protect the character of the neighborhood. One of the things we stand up, of course, is the Memphis 3.0 plan, our comprehensive plan that talks about future land use and what that future growth should look like, informed by the community. And so here we've got two different colors that are kind of in main view. I think this is, I would call this like at least an orange for today. And so that color is the anchor neighborhood, mix of building types. And generally, that future land use is going to support commercial, support mixed-use development, supports the commercial uses that are already there, and supports commercial and mixed-use development that will be of the low-intensity scale for any future development. The purple area that's kind of in the middle, that will be rezoned into that MU, that mixed-use district. In our comprehensive plan, we call that Urban Main Street Future Land Use, and it too is compatible with a mix of uses and encouraged and anchors sort of that downtown walkable environment that we want to continue to support and foster along Summer. And then the next slide, which I believe is my last slide, just talks about Area 2. the future land use of Area 2. And so this lighter color that's kind of a deep beige, we'll say, is low-intensity commercial service. So the future land use essentially says this is the commercial area. It's likely to remain a commercial area, but it should be low intensity. So like I said, not a lot of auto-related uses, not a lot of storage facilities or uses that kind of take up a lot of square footage and space in the middle of a neighborhood commercial district. And so we believe, too, that the proposed rezoning from CMU 3 to CMU 1 supports this future land use as well in this area, too, of along Summer. And with that, I conclude my presentation and am open for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cash. Board members, you have any questions for Ms. Cash at this time? Okay, hearing none, we're ready for the opposition. If you would give us your name, because I can't pronounce it, and your address, please.
My name is Khalid Muthana.
Okay, thank you. Your address and your remarks.
Okay, my address is 8912 Elena Cove, Memphis, Tennessee 38016, and I'm the owner of the property 3375 Summer, which is the southwest corner of Summer and National. I want to request to keep the zoning, the CMU 3 as is, not to rezone it to MU. Zoning of MU, it will eliminate many uses to this property. I owned it for over than 5 years, and I want to keep it the way CMU 3, the uses in CMU 3. And I hope you guys can consider it. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. No, that's it. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Collard? Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none, we're going to close the public portion of the meeting. And Dr. Pritchard, we are ready for the motion.
Move approval of agenda item number 12, Z20-10.
Second.
Is that Ms. Wilbanks?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this case? Is there any discussion on this proposal? Hearing none, I assume we're all ready to vote, and we will do that by roll call.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Wilbanks?
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon? Mr. Tolles?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell?
Yes.
Dr. Pritchard?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace?
Yes.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
That's 10 ayes.
10 ayes, motion carries. Thank you very much. Do we have any
Thank you,
other...
Chair.
Pardon? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Do we have any other items that you would like to address, Mr. Whitehead?
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, at this time, I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and then if I had my accompaniment with me, I would sing a song, but I don't have it with me right now. So, thank you, everybody, for everything that you've done all year, and it's quite a year. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Mary.
Great job, Mary.